Welcome to the I Love Coaching podcast, where we believe coaching solves everything.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the I Love Coaching podcast. We have a guy here today who's going to bring not only immense value, but a lot of experience. Mr. Mike Brown comes to us from the great state of Colorado and is going to come to us, from exiting a business, and I believe an 8-figure business. The wealth space, knowledge of wealth is incredible. Can't wait for you all to be writing down everything he says. And lastly, his coaching space. This man is a coach of all coaches and is going to share with us what value he brings to his clients on a daily basis. So everyone, welcome Mike Brown here to the I Love Coaching podcast. Mike, pleasure to have you, my friend.
Adam, appreciate it, my friend. That is a warm intro. I really appreciate it and look forward to diving in.
Absolutely. Now, we'll give our audience here some background on us. We met through Dan's organization, Dan Martell. I believe Dan's a good friend of yours. I see you're wearing his shirt right there. Yep, that's right. You're not pointing at your own boobs. You're pointing at Dan's shirt there. And now, how long have you been in Elite, and what's your background with Dan, actually?
I was a founding member of Elite. Dan's one of my best friends. We've been really good friends since I think 2017. We actually met at a rally racing event, and cool. It turns out we're both quite competitive, a little bit type A sometimes, and we were both trying to full send the cars and outdo each other, and that was kind of the basis of our friendship. I started going on a snowboarding trip every year, and then our relationship has just kind of deepened over the past 7 or 8 years. I was just in Kelowna with the fam visiting. My kids are best friends with his kids. It's really fun to build those kind of intentional relationships with people that are also on the path looking to improve themselves and be the best version of themselves. So it's been a very, very cool relationship.
That's awesome. Yeah, I too, let's see here. I jumped into Elite right when he launched it back in April of 23, which is really cool. And then got the opportunity to go to Kelowna in July of 23 when he did his first mastermind event with the Elite group. So Kelowna is a beautiful part of I didn't even know Kelowna existed on this planet until Dan Martell. And what a beautiful part of the country.
Yeah, most people don't. It's totally a hidden gem. I feel bad even talking about it because I feel like if people knew, they'd be rushing there. There's kind of no place that exists like that on the planet that I've found anyway.
The mountains, the lake, just the culture.
Wineries.
Yeah, super cool. Super cool. All right, let's dive into Mike Brown. So let's see here. We got background in the military first, right? So here's what we normally do. That's what I love to do. You were born, and then what happened? Just tell us who Mike Brown is.
Yeah, so I grew up in Midland, Texas, which is nowhere you want to be. It's flat, hot, and windy, but it becomes important later in the story. I went to the military. I went to the Naval Academy for college, and then I ended up flying jets for the Navy. I was a backseater in F-18s, and I think the coolest experience you can possibly have in your 20s. I loved my time in the military. I learned a ton. I learned about high performance. I learned about discipline and really being in the elite of the elite when it comes to flying jets and testing myself in combat, and phenomenal experience overall. But at the same time, I always say that, I wouldn't trade my Navy experience for any amount of money, and you couldn't give me any amount of money to still be in the Navy. So I learned equal amounts about what not to do. And, just being in a slow, big, bureaucratic organization, I knew that I wanted to be the captain of my own destiny, and entrepreneurship was always an inevitability for me, really, even from the day I joined the Navy.
Yeah, that's good. So post Navy now, what happens?
Yeah, so I got out in 2011. I moved back to my hometown, which again is nowhere I ever wanted to be moving back to, but a family friend, my parents were not wealthy growing up. We were squarely middle class, and we can get into that a bit later. But a family friend who was not a billionaire at the time, but he was making a good run at it, offered me a job, and he was actually my uncle's business partner. And went to work for them, and it was really, he said when I joined the organization, it was the greatest time in the history of oil and gas to be in oil and gas. And it was, he was right. I worked for them for a couple of years and then struck out on my own, started my own firm. And a rising tide lifts all boats. We were really in one of the most exciting times in history with horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, unlocking massive oil and gas deposits that have been forgotten about for decades. And it was a wild ride. We built and sold an 8-figure investment firm, and happy to share more. But that was kind of a 5-year crazy story.
The neat part about that story, even though that was pretty surface level, there is it all started with the right who, though.
Absolutely. I mean, look, people ask me all the time, like how, if you're just starting out, what do you do? And my answer is always 2 things. Number one, find a skill set and go all in building your own skill set and become immensely valuable to somebody else. And that is the mentorship part. And I think people get it wrong with, there's a lot of advice online about finding a mentor. I think the best way to find a mentor is to go work for somebody. Like go get a job and be valuable to that person and go all in on building your skill set in service of building their business. Like that is the best way to find mentorship. I think it's kind of a misnomer to be like, go find a rich person and ask them for their time. Like it's just that's not the way it works, right? Like I want to go make that person money if I want to access their knowledge.
Gosh, it's so well said there. It's who you surround yourself with matters. After my father passed away, he was an Olympic swim coach and pretty much my coach my entire life. I sat on the beach here in Charleston. We call it the beach chair moment inside of our community. And that was when I sat there and that's, I'm a spiritual guy. And so that's one of the 2 things that God's spoken to me was who you surround yourself with matters. And you're not around the right people right now. So you better go exit the companies that you're with to go find the right who's. And so that's really powerful there. So the right who positioned you for the right opportunity then. And then you took that opportunity and grew it and then exited it, right?
Yeah, it was like I said, it was a 5-year wild ride. We were in the knife fight. Essentially, we were an aggregator, meaning we were buying properties from like $50,000 to $2 million, and then putting them into like $5 to $15 million tranches and selling them off to private equity funds. Yeah, it was a really crazy time. Cold calling, sending out direct mail. Like we were very old school in the kind of an industry, but we were really trying to innovate and push the boundaries of what was possible in buying as many deals as we could, and then making our investors a lot of money. And so that's a theme I think you'll probably hear is that like, hey, if you always make sure that the person on the end is getting more value than you are, then you're going to always continue to grow because that is a piece of a deal that everybody wants a part of, right? So. Yeah. If I'm making 10% and they're making 90%, like good, that means they're going to keep doing deals with me for the rest of my life. And that's exactly what the kind of value that I always want to bring.
Yeah, that's good. So now let's go post-exit. So post-exit, what'd you step into now?
Yeah, so this is, in many ways, this is where I kind of say, this is where my story begins. Because prior to exiting and even post-exit, I had a certain arrogance, I think, that only someone who's never failed at anything could have. And I say that with love, for the guy that I was back then. But there's just, if you've always been able to excel and achieve anything that you've put your mind to, there's maybe a certain lack of empathy that, until you've hit rock bottom, you maybe just not have access to. And that was certainly the case for me, being this type A military guy, fighter pilot, entrepreneur. I was on top of the world. I had what I call Midas touch syndrome. I thought everything I touched turned to gold. Right. It turns out I was mistaken. And after I exited, so I started angel investing. I was taking money out of my primary business, and I was angel investing as early as 2014. I spent about $2 million on angel investments over a 3 or 4 year period. And then I kept rapidly deploying all of the capital that I made in my exit, except for the problem was I wasn't replacing that capital anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, a couple years into investing in all of these deals, all of a sudden I bought a distressed e-commerce company. I thought it was going to be a quick 12-month turnaround. I was going to 5X, just clean up the balance sheet. Total failure, crash and burn. I was losing $100,000 a month. I was building this amazing house with my fiance at the time. Cost overruns were stacking up. We built right during COVID, so steel and wood go through the roof, and my builder's calling me asking for checks every week, and really got into this financial liquidity crisis where I was still a multimillionaire on paper, but I couldn't access any of my capital. And, I was essentially really, really broke and really scared. And, we love to make fun of like lottery winners and athletes for losing all of their money, but this happens to entrepreneurs all the time. And, that really is kind of the genesis of what I'm doing now is like, I realized, hey, there's a lot of us out there who are really good at making money, but we're not necessarily good at keeping and growing that money. And where is the disconnect between those two things?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've heard many times you only keep the money you're emotionally prepared to receive. And if that holds so much water with so many things. It's us entrepreneurs, we can drive real fast. We can drive real hard. We can make a lot of money. And boy, can we lose it real quick too.
Totally. And really, there's actually studies that show like the faster you make money, the faster you tend to lose it. Because there's kind of a disconnect with that kind of wealth. And the way I say kind of the same thing that you did is that you have to become a person worthy of that wealth. And if you're not, no matter how much money you make, you will always continue to be on that treadmill of high risk, high reward. And you have to really become a person whose habits and mindset reflects that of a millionaire. Even if you were a millionaire on paper, it doesn't necessarily matter.
So walk me now into the coaching space. So did the coaching space come from the experience of, oh shit, I almost lost it? Or where did the coaching space, where was its origin?
Yeah, so I actually started coaching in 2018, even before I exited my company. I was mentoring a lot of the founders that I was angel investing in, and I realized that was something that I really enjoyed doing. So, back then I was more of a general business coach, helping people from the tactical side. And, early on I started to realize that there are no real business problems. There are mostly personal problems that show up as business problems.
Right.
And that, truly your business will never grow beyond your personal limitations. And so I started really deep diving, the psychology and mindset of the limiting beliefs that keep us stuck. And they really, after now kind of coaching for, 7 or 8 years, have realized like there's only different flavors of the same ice cream. And what I mean by that is like we all share these very few, like 10 or 12 limiting beliefs that all kind of show up in different ways. And if we can get to the core of that, that's going to unlock more growth than analyzing the P&L ever could.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love that because I agree that if you look at coaching as a whole, right? If you look at the actual coaching space, from my father who's an Olympic swim coach to us being entrepreneurial coaches and even coaching coaches, coaching's all relatively the same, right? You're coaching to the whole person there, not specifically their problem. You're coaching to the person, and that normally then shows up in the business side. It shows up in their relationships. And so that's really, let me ask you this. So you're building this multi-million-dollar business and you're also coaching at the same time. I would imagine that lowered your dollar productivity per hour. Did it not?
I didn't start coaching till I was really on the backside of building that company. And what I mean was, I was only working a few hours a week. Everything was completely systematized and automated, and we were actually preparing for sale. So, I definitely do not advocate to starting a side hustle, even if it's something as cool as coaching and detracting from growing your primary business. I think that there's something to be said for focus and eliminating as many distractions as possible, especially if you're driving toward that liquidity event. So yeah, my coaching practice really started on the backside of growing, and that company was winding down by the time I really started doing that formally. Yeah.
So now let's go into the actual coaching business space now. So now who's your avatar that you coach right now?
Yeah. So my coaching program is called Unbreakable Wealth, and this really is born of my own experience. I kind of moved from the general business coaching side and really realized that from a personal finance perspective, like I said, a lot of us are really good at making money, but not necessarily knowing what to do with that money. Because for most of us, we got into business for freedom, ultimately, right? Like, we want to make wealth, but But really what we want is the ability to do what we want, when we want, with who we want, right? Like that is why most of us started our business in the first place. And somewhere along the way, we lose sight of that, right? We get beholden to our business. It's almost like we have a tiger by the tail. And now, we might be financially successful on paper, but we're not actually living the life that we want to. And so, what my program focuses specifically on is how do we design the life that we actually want to live, and then use our income and our wealth to support building that life. And at the same time, how do we eliminate those money stories or limiting beliefs that are keeping us stuck from reaching that fullest, best version of ourselves?
Yeah, that's good. What's fascinating about that coaching niche there is, man, you are dealing with two beasts. You're dealing with money and you're dealing with people's psychology and behavior around money. That's quite the uphill battle. I mean, what do you believe, if you could generalize here, knowing that we're talking about money, and in my experience in coaching entrepreneurs, there's a large fear of money. Though, is it really a fear of money, or is it a fear of money from their past patterns of thinking and behavior? What do you experience with your clients?
Yeah, so there's really two fundamental problems that we have to solve. Number one is systematizing our wealth creation in a way that actually builds the thing that we want to build, what we set out to build in the first place, right? So anytime we have a problem, there's two fixes. There's a mechanical fix, meaning building systems and processes to make sure that you get to where you want to go. And then there's the emotional or psychological fix, which tends to be a little tougher. But I think both of those need to happen in tandem in order for us to achieve the proper outcome, right?
Yeah.
So we give people a system to automate wealth creation in a way that gets them exactly to the goal that they set out to hit, right? And that looks different for everybody, by the way. There's no one size fits all when it comes to wealth creation. And anybody that is telling you otherwise is either has a vested interest in you investing in whatever thing they're pitching, or just doesn't have the grasp of the complexities of what being an entrepreneur looks like, right? So I think there's a real gap in founder-led programs because a traditional financial advisor kind of just has a different mentality. Most of their people aren't entrepreneurs. They don't have the ups and downs and highs and lows, where one year you might be earning $1 million, the next year you might be 500K in the hole. That is not so easy to put a 70-30 plan onto and automate savings from your W-2. And then the second part is, okay, let's look at our actual decision making and why we're making these decisions. And that is what's really interesting to me, because all of us grew up with things that happened to us as it relates to money, either what we witnessed from our parents, maybe things that happened in early adolescence or early adulthood, and they imprint patterns on our brain. And those patterns run in the background, designed only for one thing, and that's to keep us safe.
That's right.
Like that is what our brain's primary function is to do. And our brains are pattern matching machines. So it looks at things that happened in the past and it applies those things to things that are actually happening now and tries to match those things up and go, okay, well, this happened over here, so that therefore that must be happening now. And the real challenge is to extract those situations and go, hey, actually, no, your prior experiences are clouding this. This isn't what the data is showing at all. You're actually in a much different situation now. How do we anchor you into safety, get you back into reality, and then enable you to recognize those patterns and make better decisions with the data actually at hand?
That's good. What would you say to someone listening right now who is like, holy shit, I see my patterns showing up every day and I don't know how to get out of them? Right? I can feel them. I can see them. I've even been exposed to them by other people telling me. What would you tell them would be the first 1, 2, or 3 steps that they should take to realize and actualize that those are just patterns happening, that they can actually get out of them?
Yeah. So this is you just nailed the first step of my 4-step process. So the first step is awareness, right? Understanding, hey, this is a pattern or a subconscious belief that may not line up with reality. So I'll give you an example for me. I hate being late. Like I lose my mind when I am late. If we are 5 minutes late to a dinner reservation, I start having a panic attack and driving, like a maniac trying to make sure I get there on time. Right. I am having an outsized reaction to being 5 minutes late. Right. That's the awareness of the pattern. Okay. So my reaction is not matching this actual situation at hand. That means somewhere in my subconscious, something's being triggered. Okay. Second step on that is insight. Okay. Where did this come from? For me, that comes from the Navy, because literally we would repeat, early is on time is late, and late is dead. Because if we were late dropping a bomb, there were people losing their lives potentially on the ground. Like, we were creating a dangerous situation. So it was drilled into us that we had to be on time, or we were actually at risk of death. So now I can tie this thing. What's happening here, if I'm 5 minutes late to this dinner reservation, my brain is signaling to my body that I am about to die. Okay. That's the insight portion. So now to your question, what do we do about it? Third step is action. Because what happens is we love to get stuck on insight. We love to mine our past and be like, well, my parents did this thing to me, and so that's why I am the way I am. And this is why talk therapy, which, by the way, love talk therapy, think it's a really important thing, but you can kind of get stuck in this mining loop of trying to figure out where all these things came from. None of that really matters if you don't tie an action to how do I arrest this pattern and start repatterning my brain. So for me, an action in that scenario might be a pattern interrupt and a series of questions that bring me back into reality and settle me back into my body. So in this case, I have a 3-question meditation. I just take a deep breath and go, okay, is this true? Right? Is this real? Am I really in a life or death scenario right now if I'm 5 minutes late? Number 2, how old is this? Okay, yep, I know this is from the Navy. I go back to that time, and then what do I need to feel safe or feel good about this situation right now? So in some case, that might be self-soothing. Hey, actually, I know that this isn't, coming up right now. This isn't a real situation. Or maybe it's turning to my partner and going, hey, is it okay if we're later? Are they going to give our dinner reservation away? And she can actually reassure me that, hey, I'm safe, straight and level in this moment, and that nothing bad is happening. And then finally, after we do that enough times, now we come to integration. Right? So you can actually repattern your brain where I'm not having this outsized reaction to being late anymore, because I've interrupted that pattern and then repatterned my brain to normalize safety in kind of what's reality versus what might be happening. So that's the loop. The thing is, it's a loop because you still need to continue that awareness, because even after you've integrated a pattern, it's still going to continue to show up in more and more insidious ways. And it's really just it's not about making it go away entirely. It's about shortening that time to recognize and time to kill.
Yeah, that's good. Gosh, that is so good. All those listening, pause for a second, push rewind, go back to about 4 minutes and listen to that again. You did the cleanse, didn't you?
I did not do the Martell.
You didn't do the cleanse. Okay.
I did my own version. I did a 60-day carnivore diet, which is kind of the most extreme diet I've ever done, and it's pretty wild.
So we're talking about a cleanse here that Martell brought into the world of his fitness side, and I'll never forget. I was able to have a conversation offline with Alan, the fitness guy, who had put this whole thing together. And when I saw the cleanse for the first time, it was 16 days, and I've never drank a cup of coffee in my life. Never tried it. And the cleanse of 16 days, if I did the math right, I believe it was at least 3 cups of coffee for at least 14 days. And so my first question was, what can I substitute coffee for, right? But pause the story, because that's a pattern. Right? The pattern is I don't drink coffee. Well, why don't I drink coffee? I don't drink coffee because of the caffeine. I don't like the way the caffeine makes me feel from a jittery standpoint. Okay, well, where was that created? My parents drink coffee. Nope, they didn't drink coffee either. Why? Because my dad said if you got up early enough and did exercises, that was enough coffee for you, period. Right? So this day, I still get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm exercising for my coffee, right? So now Alan looks at me and he says, okay, are you going to do the cleanse? And I said, yes, I'm going to do the cleanse. I said, but what can I substitute for coffee? He says, I have one more question. Are you going to do the cleanse? And I said, I don't understand what you don't hear. Yes, I'm going to do the cleanse, but I don't want to drink coffee. He says, well, then you're not going to do the cleanse. And it was at that moment in time that I realized I was letting my past pattern impact my future opportunity. And I had to stop allowing the past dictate the present action that I was going to be taking so that I could have the future Adam that I wanted to have. And I share that story all the time because that's exactly what you just said. And I at least ended the call by saying, can I at least have decaf? And he said, yes. I said, great. So I smashed decaf coffee on ice like it was water going out of style. Though at the end of the day, the reward was truly what I went through in those 16 days. And it was powerful. So exactly what you just said there. Gosh, the outcome that we get when we commit to that is powerful. It's so powerful.
Totally. And here's what I love about that story. It doesn't mean that you need to become a coffee drinker on the backside.
Right.
Yep. You still get to choose whether or not you're a coffee drinker. And that's what some people are really worried about. They're like, hey, if I do this work, what if I lose my edge? Like, what if I give up the things that make me great? And my answer is, hey, if your edge is driven from a place of lack or a bad place, like you might actually lose your edge, but you'll be able to build something so much better on the backside and create from a place of true wholeness and alignment rather than being driven by some false narrative that, yes, maybe has made you successful up to this point, but don't you want to see what's on the other side of that?
Totally.
Right? Like, so many of us start our businesses to fill up a hole, to just feel good about ourselves. You know, until we have money, we're never going to be good enough. Like we have all of these stories that we create, and then we get to the other side of that. And you know, I'm very much the rule rather than the exception here. You know, the day I sold my company, I thought I'd never be unhappy again. Like I did all the things that society told me I was supposed to do. Like I went and tested myself in combat. I built this 8-figure company. I had all the money, the cars, the house. I had done it. And I wasn't any different on the backside.
Yep.
And I was like, oh shit, now what? Like,
Yep.
That didn't work. That didn't fill up the hole. Now what am I going to do? Right? Well, it was because all of those things were driven from a place of lack rather than truly creating the life that I wanted to create. That wasn't my dream, right? That was society's dream that was impressed upon me that I just tried to live up to. Now what I get to do is create on the backside of that something that is truly for my own self. And so now money is just a means of keeping score, right? Like money is a tool to create the life that I want to create, but it's by choosing that and like diving into my own patterns and going, hey, what is it that I actually want and why? Did I inherit this belief or is this a belief that I chose for myself? I think that's the powerful part of the story.
So how would you teach or coach someone to go find that? Right? If they're listening right here, it's like, holy shit, that was an incredible statement that you just gave there. And I want to go find mine, right? I don't want to have anything that's been impressed on me through society, through my past, through my family, through whatever it may be. And I don't know if we're talking about a big why here or not, though I know what you're speaking of. What would you say to someone to stop listening right now and go do this one action to start to create awareness in that space for themselves?
So the first thing that I like to have people do is actually envision the life that they want to live, right? So I have an exercise called Perfect Calendar. I'll send it to you. You can link it in the show notes if you like. You know, I'm certainly not the one that created this. There's lots of different versions of it. Dan has the preloaded year. The Perfect Calendar came from a guy named Clay Hebert that's a brilliant friend of mine. But it's essentially mapping out your ideal life on a daily, weekly, monthly, and annual basis, right? And this includes how much money I want to be making, you know, what kind of work I want to be doing, getting really clear about the outcome. Because once we have that, now we can solve everything by working backwards, right? Okay, all the way to the state you are in today and go, okay, how do I get here? And what needs to be true for this life to actually happen, right? And when you do that, you will start identifying places where you are not free. And that's one of my favorite ways. One of my favorite coaching questions is, where am I not free?
That's so good.
Right? So maybe in my perfect calendar, you know, I'm living by the beach because I love surfing and that's what I want to do every day, but I'm stuck living in St. Louis. Well, the first thing I do is start justifying why I don't live by the beach. Well, my parents live here and I couldn't possibly leave them and I need the childcare and this is where my office is. And so immediately our limiting beliefs start coming up and saying, well, this is why I can't actually live this life that I want to live.
Right?
What if we throw all that aside? what if we take away all of your excuses? Right? That is where we start to find these patterns and these ways that we subtly keep ourselves stuck. Right? Now, you may have aging parents and be stuck where you want it, but like just acknowledge the fact that you're making that choice rather than I couldn't possibly make another choice.
Right. That's good. That's really good. Yeah, I love that language. Frustration shows you where you're not free.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just can you keep track of daily frustrations, and then can you separate those of showing yourself where you're not free? That's good.
Yeah. Look, everything that I bring to this is born of my own experience. So, I love to tell my clients, like, hey, I'm never going to ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So, right. One of the first and foremost thing is that I am a work in progress. I am doing my best to become the best version of myself on a daily basis. And there are still a lot of places where that question shows up for me and still gives me answers to this day.
That's good. Let me ask you one last question, maybe a more personal question here. Because I know you have kids, and I too have kids, and I think about not only my experiences as an adult, as a entrepreneur, and I look at my kids. I've got 2 teenage kids, 16-year-old boy and a soon-to-be 14-year-old girl here this month. And I look at them. They both have followed my path, which is the tennis world here recently. They're both nationally ranked tennis players. My daughter was just basically in the U.S. Open, the under 14 junior U.S. Open this past weekend, which was super cool. Cool. And I look at my experiences, and without projecting onto them, I try to position them so they can think this way right now. Right? Think this way. And as a teenager, my father did not impress that on me. He had a path for me, and that was Olympic swimmer. Well, I broke his heart because I became a tennis player. And what do you think with your language here and your coaching skill set and your experience now as you look at your kids and say, how do I help you even faster than I helped myself?
I absolutely love this question. So I have a 11, almost 12-year-old and a 6-year-old daughter, and I think parenting is the most sacred thing that I do. I love parenting. Well beyond any kind of business or coaching or anything else. I think it's our most important job. And I look at my job as a parent as one thing, is exactly what you said. How do I prepare my kids to choose their own experience without me projecting my experience onto them?
Right.
So I love that you actually brought that out, right? Because so many parents, and I see this all the time with entrepreneur parents, they're like, well, how do I raise my kids to be entrepreneurs? I go, why would you want to do that? like that's a path that you found that really worked for you, but that's not, most of the world is not built to be entrepreneurs. And why would I project onto my kids what's working for me when right. They actually have their own completely unique personalities and skill sets? Like, right. Hey, if I want to give them the doors to entrepreneurship, and I want to get, I ask my kids questions all the time. Like I ask my son driving to school, like, hey, you see any other kids driving to school in a McLaren? No. Where do you think that comes from? Like let's have a conversation about this. Right. But rather than telling him what he needs to do, it's like, let me unlock these things so that you can come to your own conclusions. Like so above all else, I want to grant my kids sovereignty, meaning they are in charge of their own bodies, their own life choices. And all I can do is ask really good questions to help them inform their decisions and learn how to make better decisions. Right? But number one, I can't save my kids. Yeah. Meaning they're going to make mistakes. It's going to be painful to watch. I have to allow them to develop their own decision-making frameworks, because if I just tell them how to make decisions, I'm doing them a tremendous disservice.
Yep.
Right. So all I want to do is shorten that pain. And by the way, keep them from making catastrophic decisions. Like, I really hope you don't get pregnant. I really hope that you don't, drink and drive and kill somebody. Like there are a few things that are hard-nosed. But other than that, I want to give them decision-making frameworks so that they can come to their own conclusions and be in charge of themselves. And if they say, hey, I want to grow up and be an artist, or I want to grow up and be a school teacher, or whatever it is, like, let me empower you to be that best version of yourself rather than trying to project my worldview onto you.
That's so good. It's so good. Yeah, I agree with you. Being a parent, if my wife would have a football team, I'd have a football team tomorrow, man. I love being a parent that much.
Yeah,
and lastly,
it's a privilege.
It definitely is a privilege. Well, Mike, this has been awesome, man. Really appreciate you being on the I Love Coaching podcast. I have no doubt that our listeners right now just got a ton of value. Speaking of McLaren, real quick. So my son turned 16 at the end of July, and loves supercars. We went to the Indy 500 for, I think, 8 years in a row, just watching cars. We have a goal that we want to go to every F1 race on the calendar year together. So that'll be really cool one day soon. And he's in South Carolina here. You can drive at the age of 15. Yeah. And so he actually got his permit at 15. He bought a truck from me at 15 and a half. And so he's been driving since he was 15 and a half. And I thought for his birthday, I would go rent an exotic car for him. So I got him a 520S McLaren? Is it 520 or 570? I can't remember.
570,
and 570, yeah, 570S. And picked him up. I told him he had to leave his truck at home because I was giving him a surprise, and the surprise was when he walked out, I was getting it detailed. So he's like, "Oh, that's cool. Dad's just getting the truck detailed." And then I pick him up at school at his tennis academy, and he walks by. He's like, "Dad, that McLaren is sick." I mean, it was McLaren orange. It was sick. And he walks by. He's like, "Man, that was sick." And I popped the trunk or the hood in the front so he could put his bag in there. And he's like, "Dang, did you see that?" And when I walked by it opened up. I was like, "Put your bag in there. You're driving." And he's like, "How are we going to drive?" I said, "With the keys." And so we drove that puppy for a good 24 hours. He got a taste of it. But the point of me sharing that story is I put him in the experience so he could experience that at the age of 16, what it felt like to drive a McLaren, and the joys that it brought to him and the smile that it put on his face. And I made him journal afterwards, and I got to read the journal, and he was just like, an experience that felt great, though I know it's not the end of the be all end all to own a McLaren now. I was like, "Good for you."
Oh,
buddy.
yeah.
Good for you.
Totally. I mean, I love that, right? Because there's the, by the way, like I definitely think of cars as experiences, all the research shows that experiences over things. I think people get that at this point, but things can be experiences as well. So,
sure.
When someone's thinking about making that purchase, it's like, well, what are the emotions that you want to feel? How do you think that thing is going to make you feel about yourself? Like, what is the experience that you might have? And if that experience is valuable to you, then go do it, man.
Go get it. Yeah.
If that's the thing that's going to motivate you to go build and sell a company or develop a skill set, go for it. Right. But just realize it's probably not going to make you feel the way that you want to feel. It's not going to make you feel that love and admiration and the thing that we're really searching for. But, going 150 miles an hour with your hair on fire is real fun. And if that's the experience you're seeking, let's go for it.
Right. I may or might not let him go over a certain speed limit. We won't put that here for legal sake, though he had a blast doing it. Yeah. Totally. Well, Mike, really appreciate you. How can our listeners go find you? How can they get involved in your coaching? I know many of them would probably want to hire you right now in that mindset, mental, how-to wealth building space. So tell them how to come get in touch with you.
Yeah, definitely. Follow me on Instagram at mbrown.co. That's the best place to connect. Send me a message if you want to learn more about the programs. I've got one-on-one coaching and group coaching. I'm telling you, the group coaching is a steal. We have an incredible group of entrepreneurs, anywhere from that 1 million to exited for 80 million type mark and everywhere in between. So it's a really tight-knit community of people that are intentionally building wealth and building a life they never have to retire from. We'd love to have you. The other cool thing, I spend a ton of time writing my newsletter every week. So if you go to unbreakablewealth.com/newsletter, you can sign up. And it's a long form weekly newsletter, just kind of my experience in the trenches, things I'm thinking about, frameworks that are super useful for investing. And it's one of my favorite things I do. So I'd love to have you join there.
Cool. All right, buddy. Appreciate you. And we'll see you in the elite group.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you having me on.
Take care, buddy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.